So many changes with that. We will have the opportunity to provide virtual participation so that we can address those accessibility and travel needs moving forward. So we'll have virtual participation, and I think that we're thinking about having a routine of visiting a community once per year, similar to what we're doing here. So if any advisory group members have safer funded projects and would love to host the advisory group, please let us know. We'd love to visit your community too. So before I pass the mic to Castulo to welcome us to the Coachella Valley Water District, I want to just orient you to all of the materials that you all have. So you should have a blue folder that has our agenda, that has, our updates, and that has our PowerPoints. If you need any other copies, we have additional materials here. And then for some logistics, we have restrooms located outside of the room. You can follow the sign. They are gendered women's restrooms and men's restrooms. Also want to give a quick logistics for members of the public who are watching us. There's a couple different options for members of the public to participate. They can watch them on video.calipa.ca.gov. They can submit a comment by emailing safer@waterboards.ca.gov. And if anyone has needs assistance, whether technical assistance or language interpretation assistance, they can always email the safer@waterboards.ca.gov email as well. So if you're watching my webcast, thank you for joining us too. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Castulo to welcome us to the Coachella Valley Water District.
Thank you. Thank you. I would just Water District. This is the city of Coachella. The valley is made up of 9 cities, all the way from Palm Springs down to the city of Coachella. And then from here onto the South Sea is all unincorporated area. Yeah, it's an honor for us to host you. We've put in a lot of work to try to put together, I think, a pretty comprehensive day that's going to showcase a lot of the work that we've been doing here in the Coachella Valley in partnership with the state. This is something that we've been working on for probably about 10 years. We've put together a plan of projects. We've started executing some of those projects, and some of those have been completed. Some of those are about to get complete, and we have more projects that we're going to work on. And today, I think we're going to highlight a lot of that. We're going to go to West Side so that we can have a celebration. There is just for a little bit of background. I didn't realize I had more time, so I'll just share this. In your packet, there's a little bit of history of who we are. That way you get a sense of who we are here in the valley. We were formed in 1918, really with the purpose of securing Colorado River water. So we started 100 years ago because of all the agriculture that we have here. We wanted to make sure that we had a plan to protect groundwater back then to try to secure Colorado River water rights, which we did. Over the years after that, we started getting into other services as the valley started to grow, and more just agriculture. A lot of the cities that you see as you come in, Palm Springs, Palm Desert, Rancho Mirage, and Indian Wells, those came in a lot later, maybe around the 1950s or 1960s. And as that growth started to occur, CBWD started entering into other services, which are listed here, which is domestic water service, sanitation services, replenishment, things of that nature. And so now we've kind of morphed into a very multifaceted agency that provides a bunch of different types of services. But because historically this part of the valley has been agriculture, that in itself has created a reality where there's seems to be like a lack of traditional housing in the form of housing tracts or multifamily apartments. And so what's happened over the decades is the families and the people that live there, 70,000 acres of agriculture have kind of been left to their own to create their own housing, which is taking shape in the form of trailer parks. And so that's what has been occurring in the east side, not recently, but probably for the last 50, 40 years, right? So we find ourselves in a situation where we have more than 100 of them, all of which rely on their own private wells. If you were to see a map of our basin, the Indus Basin, which goes from the Salton Sea up to Palm Springs, the pass, and you were to see a map of the water quality, and it was color coded, and the east side is where you have all the arsenic. And so you have a situation where the failing systems are right over the area in our aquifer with the worst water quality. And so that's the issue at hand. That's what I think that's what SAFER is all about. And that's something that we've been working on here at the district for too. And so thank you again for being here. Thank you for making the time, for making the travel. I hope that when you leave with a better understanding of our issues here locally, which I think are representative of issues across the state. And I think you're going to enjoy the day. Thank you again for being here, and
Awesome. Next, I want to pass the mic to our board chair, Joaquin Esquivel.
Thank you, Adriana. And thank you, Castillo and CBWD for hosting us here this morning. And throughout the day. It's really appreciated. For those of you, I think most of you know who I am, the name is Joaquin Esquivel, and I have the honor of being the chair of the State Water Resources Control Board currently. I actually grew up here in the Eastern Coachella Valley. So this history that Castillo spoke of, I'm here because of. My grandfather on the other side is a bracero. He worked here in the date palms at Oasis State Garden. Actually lived behind there on a ranch. My grandparents for a long while, and so I grew up knowing that even here, just getting into La Quinta, as you go into the western end of the valley, and as you experience life here in the eastern end, there's some disparities. And I think that many of you, I just have to first and foremost just thank you for your service here on the committee, for continuing to provide us your expertise on how we tackle a challenge that has been with us for generations, truly, and here decades, are the product of kind of decisions on how we've developed as communities. And it's not unique to the Eastern Coachella Valley. You all know it's the San Joaquin as well. And when you think of so many of our communities, there is this tie between the way we decided to develop communities that were sort of left up behind when it came to municipal service being extended. And in here, us having to now after the fact, come back and say, well, how do we achieve the human right to water? How do we achieve really important goals that we continue to embrace, but history and legacies of decision making that maybe didn't lend us to that. So it's pretty easy. It comes with a lot of humility because communities have been without access for generations, oftentimes, and decades. And coming into the space that isn't just water access or sewer access, it's electricity, it's housing standards, it's everything that I think I know easily take for granted in the day-to-day living experience that not everyone shares. And I think that I'm fortunate to feel the history here, to do what I can in my role to connect people to the work. But it doesn't happen without a lot of individuals, and you all here continue to give us your time, your experience to connect to this work. I just can't thank you enough. And so it was nice to sleep in my childhood home last night, to wake up to this beautiful place, and to think, how do we continue to make sure that we expand the assumptions that again we all take for granted oftentimes, and especially this 21st century here where we're at. So thank you. Really appreciate all your time. Look forward to throughout the day talking with one another further and enriching our understanding of the challenges we face here. And I can't thank you enough for your work. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Joaquin. So we will begin all of our safer advisory meetings. We begin with a reminder of our water board's mission. The mission of the water boards is to preserve, enhance, and restore California's water resources for the benefit of present and future generations. The Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience Drinking Water Program is a key aspect of helping the water boards enact that mission and to bring true environmental justice to California. All of you are a really big part in that. So as we start our Safer Advisory Group meeting, we want to begin by acknowledging all of the groups who have experienced social, economic, and environmental disadvantages as a result of historic marginalization, like Joaquin mentioned. And as we begin this meeting, we also want to remember that our work should strengthen the empowerment of community workers as we work together to bring safe and affordable water to all. So thank you for helping us make that happen. And we're showing today's agenda. We're going to begin with a quick round of introductions of everyone in our advisory group. Then we're going to be going over the 2023 progress made and accomplishments. We will also be having a discussion about a new tool that was developed to help measure and track the status of different drinking water projects. We will then talk about updates on the annual needs assessment and other safer programmatic updates. We'll have an opportunity for public comments, both here in the room and also virtually. And then after we wrap up for lunch, we're going to be having a tour around the Coachella Valley to celebrate over 100 consolidations in the SAFER program since 2019, and also community leadership that led to the success of many projects that we visit. A couple reminders for our meeting today. We have breaks scheduled throughout today's agenda, but we encourage you, if you need to step outside or take a break, please do that as you need. We ask that you speak slowly. We do have live Spanish interpretation taking place. So this is a reminder for myself as well to speak slowly and to help each other out. If we are speaking really quickly, just send a gentle reminder to one another, including myself. So please check me if I'm speaking too quickly. As you've noticed, we are not using individual mics, but we do have a central mic in this room that's picking up our audio and webcasting it. So be mindful of that. It's picking up all of the audio in the room. So just be mindful of your side conversations that's also being picked up in the room as well. Because we don't have individual mics, I also want to add a new guideline that's not on there to just try to speak as loudly as you can so that those in the room can also hear your comments as well. Throughout today's meeting, we are not going to be doing breakouts. We're going to stay in one big room and we'll have group discussions for our conversations. If you have any questions or comments, we ask that you turn your name card vertical and then we will add you to the list in chronological order. We ask that you keep your comments concise and to the point. We have a big day today and we want to make sure that we are leaving enough time for the tour and we are leaving enough time to head back to the airport as well. So if we have to cut discussion short, it's because we have a packed agenda today. For technical support, for those viewing us on the webcast, again, you can email safer@waterboards.ca.gov. For people who need support in the room, I want to acknowledge a few folks who are available to you. One is Marina Perez right here, and the other is Rachel Wittenberg in the corner. And we have another staff person in the tech room, but please don't bother her. But reach out to Marina and Rachel for any assistance. All right. So to begin, we're going to do a quick round of introductions and we're going to keep these short, just your name and your affiliation. I will kick us off and then I'll move to the right. My name is Adriana Renteria and I'm the Director for the Office of Public Participation at the State Water Board.
Good morning. I'm Joe Karkoskin, the Deputy Director of the Division of Financial Assistance at the State Water Resources Control Board.
And Ralph Vogt, I'm one of the Assistant Deputy Directors of the Division of Drinking.
Morning, everybody. Jeff Wetzel, the State Water Board and the Division of Financial Assistance.
Good morning, Gus Estrada, Board Director of the Coachella Valley Water District.
Morning, everyone. Sergio Carranza, Secretary Director of Pueblo Naval Citizen.
Good morning, everybody. Ileana Miranda, General Manager of San Gerardo Cooperative in Salinas Valley.
Good morning, buenos dias, everyone. Eric Oriana, Senior Policy Advocate with Community Water Center.
Good morning, Jennifer Hazard, Assistant Director at Rural Community Assistance Corporation.
Good morning, Kristen Dobbin, UC Berkeley.
Good morning, Rob Burrows and State Small Water System Operator.
Good morning, I'm Juana Moreno, and I'm a resident of the LeGrand community. Good morning, my name is Eva Dominguez, I'm with Self Help Enterprises.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Marta Curiel y yo vengo de la comunidad de Woodbury.
Good morning, buenos dias. My name is Marina Perez. I'm a Program Manager with the Office of Public Participation.
My name is Joaquin Esquivel, Chair of the State Water Board.
We also have a few Coachella Valley Water District folks in the room, as well as some other state water board folks. So if we could just do a quick round around the room, starting with Lorraine.
Good morning, everyone. Lorraine Garcia, Communication Manager, CBW.
I have to go down on the Executive Director of Solvency Authority.
Good morning, I'm Member Boisha with US Environmental Protection. We have no water.
Good morning, Kayla Vandersher with Self Help Enterprises.
Good morning, my name is Juan Murieta, and I'm also with Self Help Enterprises.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Victoria Price, and I'm Board Assistant Supervisor Price, District 4.
I'm Adriana Data Shannon Brother and Rachel Wittenberg with Office of Public Participation in the State Water Board.
Hi, I'm Tori Cluey with Stantec.
Morning, everyone. John Erickson with Community Water Center.
Christopher Stevens, Assistant Deputy Director with the Division of Financial Assistance at the Water Board.
Good morning, Pavel Check, State Water Board Division of Financial Assistance as well.
Great, thank you all so much for being here and for taking the time to join us in person today. I encourage you all, as we're going through the tour and as you have breaks, to reach out to one another, especially if there's new folks in the room who you haven't met with. This is a great opportunity for us to build stronger connections and networks between ourselves. All right, now with that, I'm gonna pass the mic to Jeff Wetzel, who is gonna walk us through 2023 safer accomplishments.
Good morning again. Today I was talking about some general safer funding updates. The first start today with sharing some new figures that we included in the final fund expenditure plan. And these are aimed to capture some of the cumulative data. Last advisory group meeting, I'm very well that year. So looking at the figures there, since July of 2018, the federal program has provided 650 million to small disadvantaged communities, which has helped 1.3 million people who have previously not had access to safe, clean drinking water. Other important things to note, 4,600 households have received interim solution assistance. There has been 90 drought resiliency projects funded. 150 schools have received assistance. And then talking just specifically about this past fiscal year, 65% of the funding committed to failing systems benefited from Hispanic dominated communities. Next slide, please. Trends over the past 3 fiscal years by solution type. We see the number of systems funded has been increasing. And the amount of funding has been increasing year to year. Next slide, please. We're continuing to look at the program trends over the past 3 fiscal years. These figures reflect committed funding for any active projects for a failing or at-risk system. And we see both the percentages of systems being funded and the amount of funding is generally increasing. The last meeting in early August, this year's open planning is out. And the October 3rd, the board adopted the final fund expenditure plan. This slide in the next summarizes some of the key revisions that were made based off the public comment. So first up, we did some general updates made to tables and associated text to extend the reporting range out to the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. A subsection was added to describe other funding sources available for various solution types that will ultimately affect the amounts targeted for the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund. This provision is provided in response to the migrant group members' feedback. So for example, there's a recent 55 million budget augmentation that was approved for hauled water and well repairs and replacement for domestic wells that have gone dry. Next up, for the direct O&M program text and appendix, some clarifications were made. We added technical and managerial and financial assessments as conditions for funding via the streamlined statewide prioritization process. And then to state that the funding will help lower water rates down to 2.5% of the community's median household income and establish an operating reserve account. And lastly, we related the tiers 1 and 2 to be called groups 1 and 2, because the labeling was intended just to separate the groups rather than indicating one group has a higher priority than the other. Next slide, please. We did receive some comments regarding potential impacts of the proposed hexavalent chromium maximum contaminant level. This was not addressed in the fund expenditure plan text. There are economic feasibility analysis that have been done as part of the rulemaking initial statement of reasons. And then additionally, the Division of Financial Assistance will be further coordinating the Division of Drinking Water and the potential to begin providing technical assistance for potentially impacted water systems in small and disadvantaged communities for feasibility analysis of potential long-term solutions. And then regarding metrics, there was a new subsection that was added to show the key cumulative metric highlights for the SAFER program, as well as some trends. Those were the 3 slides that we started off today. And we also labeled certain demographic information on majority, race, / usually now we call it predominant identity character. So this slide is the same that we shared with you back in August. We thought it would be worth mentioning it again. This chart shows the breakdown for last fiscal year 22-23. It shows the committed expenditures by solution type for the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund specifically. The black text is what we committed this last fiscal year, and the grayed out text is what was targeted. I won't go through the whole chart again, but some key highlights. The largest investments for the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund made last year were towards technical assistance. The funds were committed to 5 new TA providers, which increases our TA capacity across the state. And then I'll also mention that we added 15 million to a master administrator agreement to assist additional water systems. Next slide, please. Now, this slide should also look familiar. These are the targets from this year's fiscal year appropriation of 130 million. Today, I will highlight the interim supply and emergencies. There's about 40 million targets, with 15.3 million from this fiscal year and 23.5 million from prior fiscal year appropriations. Of that, about 34 million is available for state smalls and domestic wells, which the Safe Advisory Group has largely supported of. That 34 million represents a significant investment planning to help address the large number of state smalls and domestic wells considered to be at risk for either water quality or drought impacts. Next slide, please. We've also has consistently been interested in. There's 20 million targeted in this year's fund expenditure plan. And this is expected to benefit up to 30 systems using a streamlined approach that will target small disadvantaged water systems with high rates. We are anticipated to be for a 3-year term. So the direct owning guidelines were adopted in October following the fund expenditure plan as Appendix L. And in our most recent efforts, we're very close to having a webpage up for this program. And the Group 1 water systems should be receiving a notice of funding availability this month. These Group 1 water systems will have about 30 days to submit back some basic information. And then based off of that, with the information received, we'll work towards executing O&M funding agreements in the first half. Next slide, please. During the year, we also wanted to mention some of the Division of Financial Assistance process improvements that have been implemented. That is standardized scope of work and schedule, across multiple units and regions, which is expected to reduce avoidable amendments to the agreements and also shorten the agreement development timeline. We've also implemented a streamlined financial review. This reduces the application requirements for grants for the funding projects, and there is now a revised internal checklist for these projects that can be completed by staff. For emergency agreements, we now have a hauled and bottled water scope of work and extra execution of straightforward interim emergency projects. Next slide, please. These improvements significantly reduce the timeline between the initial construction application received and the executed agreement, which does benefit the recipient in multiple ways. And then lastly, technical assistance. There has been some technical assistance which have set a clear and more consistent goals for both the TA providers and our TA program staff.
And see if anyone has any questions for Jeff on the recap of 2023 accomplishments. And as we have this discussion, I just want to ask us one more time to just speak a little bit loudly. It's a big room, so I want to make sure that we can hear each other. If you have any questions or reactions or comments, please flip your name vertical. I'll pull them over.
Well, just what I wanted to say, I really appreciate the updates on the Safer O&M program and the other programs. One of the things that I'm really happy to see is the clarification for establishing the reserves and lowering the rates down to 2.5%, the median household income. I think that's really awesome. One of the things that I see is new is the TMF requirements. I was wondering if you could share more about what those TMF requirements would be for some of the tier 1 or group 1 water systems that will be applying for that funding.
Sure, yeah. What we're keeping there is those group 1 water systems and O&M agreements. There'll be some conditions along with the funding, and a lot of them will be a TMF assessment or a technical managerial financial assessment. We're talking internally with some of our TA staff, and we largely envision some of those requirements that funding will be done by TA, and some of them will be a TMF assessment.
What is a TMF?
Technical managerial financial assessment.
Yes. From Andrew. The last advisory board, we discussed the possibility to further explore, expediting the funding, especially when it comes to advancing funding for some of the projects, specifically when it comes to emergencies. Because sometimes when it comes to do a repair of a well, including well distribution and all the elements that are involved in that, it becomes a little pricey. So I don't know if there is any update on that, because I didn't see that as a part of streamlining type of program, so if you have any information, it'd be great.
Hand that to Joe.
Yeah,
I'm glad to see you.
Hi, Sergio.
I haven't seen you for a while, Joe. Thank
Yeah, good to see you. So Christopher Stevens, I know when we had our check-in recently, you gave me an update on that. I think we're finalizing our advance payment. That's from what I remember. I don't know if you have any update. I mean, we certainly have in some cases already, like with self-help enterprises, you know, with the hot water program we have there, and also they are able to provide some direct emergency funding as well in their service area. We have advanced payment provisions already baked into their agreements, but we're looking at being able to generalize that a little bit more, not just for emergencies, but also looking at for construction as well. But Christopher, did you have any update?
Well, I would just echo what you say there. It does touch on a number of different programs and it has a number of different facets. So I didn't totally hear your questions. I think it was related to the O&M, but it does touch on a lot of different types of funding that we do. And so, yes, we'll work I'm hoping to have that finished in the first quarter of next year, calendar year 2024.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, so, in regards to the technical assistance expectation and metrics, were you saying that was gonna be ready by the end of this year or early next year to getting better information on where that funding is going from the TA providers? I have a two-part question. So you did mention earlier that you had resourced out to a TA provider to assist with some financials. Is that something that's more beneficial than hiring a couple people on the board to be able to assist?
So yeah, so two parts to that question. The process improvements for the TA metrics, I believe, are implemented. I'm not sure we have anyone from our TA group here to talk specifically about that. But yeah, those are currently being implemented.
So we'll be able to see updates on that through the website? Because I don't remember being able to see any kind of information from the TAs with a little bit of a deeper breakdown.
Not sure where the updates come from.
So yeah, I wanted to clarify. So is your interest and we'd like to see are putting up periodic updates on how we're doing with the technical assistance metrics in terms of those performance measures? And I don't know if you guys talked about before, but basically what we're looking at is having clear expectations for the time between an assistance request goes out to a TA provider and when we get proposed work plan back, and then expectations on our staff for reviewing that proposed work plan, getting it reviewed or improved or comments back to that TA provider. And I know we have a couple of our TA providers here, so we've got that implemented universally right now, and we are doing the tracking of that certainly. But,
is that visible for us to be able to see, or is that more internal standpoint?
No, I mean we're happy to make that information available. I think it'd probably be most relevant though, not on a real frequent basis because yeah, there's a lot going on with our technical assistance program. I think it'll make the most sense to look at that more in sort of aggregate versus, updating every month or something like that. But certainly, and maybe with the next advisory committee meeting, we could do a report out on how things are going. I mean, you can ask Ava or, or Jennifer as well too. They would definitely be part of that sort of conversation and how things are going. We could do an overview of where things stand.
Even a buy-in, because just from the financial point of a large chunk goes to TAs and we have 5 TA providers. So what are they doing with our money? Could it be better expedited in other areas? Is where my big concern comes from, because for a while they haven't been very, it's been a little bit more of a vague area of what's been going on with the funds going to that area. So how are they utilizing those funds? What are they doing with it to be able to represent that it truly is benefiting our communities?
Yeah.
And it's allowing them to have safe, affordable drinking water. Yeah, that's our goal.
Yeah, totally. No, it's a good point. So Adriana, I think maybe a focused discussion at the next advisory committee meeting would make sense, and maybe highlighting with some of the advisory group members what they do, because it's a pretty huge variety of different activity types. But I would say the majority, just to preview a little bit, of the funding is going to pretty big planning efforts. So normally, our process had historically been, and we still allow for this, is a system would apply for a planning grant, they get the planning grant, and then they come back for a construction agreement. Now, going through that planning process, applying for the planning grant and that sort of thing could take a really long time. And so one of the things we identified was, if we had our technical assistance providers do that planning work, so basically like with self-help or RCAC, we assign a technical assistance request to them to do planning and design. And the ultimate product they need to produce is a complete application for construction, right? But that includes a lot of design work that has to be done. It can include drilling pilot wells to see if there's a better source of water for the community. And those are often, between a $500,000 and $800,000 range. So, if you think about it, that adds up really quick. But certainly we can do more of a report out on exactly a couple things. One, TA funding gone so far. How much do we still have available, right? So a lot of what Jeff was providing was our targeted amounts, or we've put money into a funding agreement, but haven't necessarily assigned assistance requests to take advantage of those funds. Right. And then we can also report on the performance metrics as well, because certainly, it's been a legitimate critique. There have been times where it's taken a long time between an assistance request going out and actual work getting done. So that's where we establish those performance metrics. And I know we're doing much better. We're not necessarily where we want to be quite yet, but there's a pretty huge improvement.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
That's a great question, Tanya, and I think it also fits into what Andrew's gonna talk about in terms of the project status. And maybe one thing that we could do to incorporate that is have an ability to filter of the projects active, who is the TA, or filter it so that you get the TA and then all of their projects within their assistance request. So great feedback. That's
Thank you. So Tanya, I just wanted to add, I think what I heard you say is that we have 5 technical assistance providers, but what we have is 5 for-profit technical assistance providers, and then we have additional nonprofit technical assistance providers. And as far as RCAC goes, we have in excess now of 60 safer projects that we're working on, and we do report to the water board on a quarterly basis, so that information is available. How much we've spent on each system, where we are in the process. So it's all available. I don't know if it's available to the public, but it certainly could be.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, Jennifer. And I like Joe's suggestion. Maybe many of the advisory group members who are technical assistance providers can share a little bit more about their work the next time too. Yeah. So I see Joaquin has it up. I also see Castulo. Castulo, is your comment also about the TA as well?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Castulo and then Joaquin.
Just to Tanya's point, I think, thanks for bringing that up, and I think what I heard is that, and I agree, there's a lot of money on technical assistance and that takes a while to get to shovel-ready projects for construction, and I think that it, at least for me, it would make sense, to get a sense of when are we gonna get to a point where a lot of that funding needs to now get moved to construction? So, I still, yes, that I heard. The technical assistance money has no construction funding, it's all planning.
Yeah, so, and again, I don't think we didn't touch on it too much here, but it was part of the fund expenditure plan in terms of sort of the whole portfolio of funds that we have available to us. So that's part of the balancing, right? Some of the funding we get is primarily available for construction. Others, like the Safe and Portable Drinking Water Fund, is available for a variety of different activity types. So yeah, certainly the natural progression is that you have, especially in small communities, you have to invest a lot in the planning efforts before you're even ready for construction. But then as over time, as they're ready to go, ready to go into construction, then we look at deploying our available resources to get those
And
projects.
I think you have mentioned in the past that there are other funding programs that you've moved to tackle construction, and that's why you're not specifically putting it in this 130.
Yeah.
And so just because we don't see money in the construction doesn't mean that there isn't construction money coming in through some other funding bucket. I think it would be helpful if we started to get a sense of when those specific dollars might not be available anymore. I think last time we heard is maybe the state got a big chunk of ARPA money or federal money that might be able to offset some of the construction dollars from this particular bucket. But at one point, I think those might be gone, right? So at what point do we start shifting some of the TA money now to construction? I think is what would give us a better sense of how to prioritize that.
Yeah, so and I don't know how much time you want to spend on this, Adrian. I'll try to be really brief. So that on the federal side, there's the bipartisan infrastructure law funds, and sort of as a quick review, that was November 2021 when it was passed and provided some supplemental appropriations for a 5-year time period. So those appropriations are not subject to all the budget discussions you hear about on an annual basis. They're sort of baked into the bipartisan infrastructure law. So that provided a pretty good increase on the drinking water state revolving fund side. I think it'll come out to, for our purposes of our discussion, the money that can go to essentially grants is around $100 million or so a year. Okay, so that's federal funds. Now, in addition to that, there are some specific buckets. So one is emerging contaminants. So that's some additional funding that's available, say around the $60 to $80 million a year range. And emerging contaminants per the federal definition are those contaminants that say they don't have a federal maximum contaminant limit, but they can be used for things like, 1,2,3 TCP, for PFAS, which a lot of the bigger water systems are directly addressing. It's very specific. And then there's also some money for lead service line replacement, which is not as big of a deal in California as it is in the Midwest or Oregon. So we have that. Then on the state side, a couple of years ago, we got a huge investment for a number of different infrastructure program types. We got about $650 million for drinking water. We've been using those funds as quickly as we can. And we did have a reversion of some of those funds in this current year state budget. So our board, when took an action to say, okay, let's take the least hit on the drinking water side, so about $50 million less there, so still $600 million total. We expect to get that back in the next year's budget, but we're, going full bore and getting those funds committed through, that expedited drinking water funding program. I think one of Jeff's earlier slides also kind of showed the trend that we have in terms of investments, right? So we're investments on small communities, and the largest chunk of that is actually construction. And most of that is not safe and affordable drinking water funds. It's mostly the state funds, their general obligation bond funds that have been passed before. We're almost through those, and then some federal funds. So that's really sort of high level. But if you look in terms of a proportion, the vast majority of our overall funding portfolio is going to construction.
Thank you for that.
And then I'll do a quick summary of what we just talked about.
Yeah, I'll just keep my comments brief. I appreciate the questions around the technical assistance, and I know the point's been made, but the reality is that our communities don't have shovel-ready projects. So the construction funding that we could be going to them have been missed by. You think of the American Recovery Act from back in like 2008 when we had the financial crisis. There was a requirement there from the federal government that projects be shovel ready. And so it missed all of our communities and their investment because we don't have shovel ready projects, and is why there was so much being spent on the technical assistance side. And agree that we need to make sure we impact the information we have. And I think it is going to be a good segue here in a minute to Andrew's presentation that is trying to unpack all that information at a system level. So you see, okay, what is the technical assistance dollars going to that system? Where are they in their process? And but to Costello, your question and concern, it is one that the board has definitely explored as well. Because the reality is that we only have so much time with the Safe and Affordable Fund guaranteed right now. And $130 million a year, if it were to go to construction, would quickly evaporate out of it. And so we are focusing a lot of these dollars on technical assistance so that we can leverage things like the bipartisan infrastructure law, which I know Administrator Guzman would hear, double up on that can go to construction, but it does get a little complicated, right? The federal programs have different requirements than say Safe and Affordable or even the state funds, but that's for us to figure out. The reality is the strategy is, have construction dollars and use those best where we have them, and really leverage the Safe and Affordable Fund to get the momentum in our communities so that they can be at those other more traditional programs that have been the bread and butter for the state board for a long while. When you look at who's been funded all these decades out of the state revolving fund, out of these programs, it is in our communities here. It is those that are more well-heeled, that have the ratepayer base, the lawyers, the engineers, the contractors to go through all of that work, that planning, that design, to then come to our more traditional construction programs. This is the first time in the last years we've actually had dollars that aren't tied to just those traditional, hey, can you afford a loan? Great, we'll give it to you if you can come to us with an application. That's a model that doesn't work for our communities, given again the history we know. So just wanted to kind of share and recap across that, and just really thank the discussion here and the desire to really impact the technical assistance work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joaquin. I think that you did a great job encapsulating why technical assistance is so key to the SAFER program. And I also love the idea of not only having more transparency, but also celebrating the great work. Even amongst this table, there's so much incredible work done with, well testing and replacement to innovative point of use and point of entry projects. So I think there's a lot to learn about and to celebrate too. All right, I'm going to pause for one more final question on 2023 accomplishments before we transition to talk about a new tool to track our project progress. Okay, well, if you don't have any questions for Jeff, please find him later today and for you as well. So with that, we're going to pass it over to Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Carolina. So this is just to give an update on a tool that we've developed. This came out of, I think it was the spring meeting of this group, where we were talking about the information that's available. We talked a little bit at that point about our safer, risk assessment tool that's up with the map and the different color codes and different things. And, there was a desire at that point to get a tool that looked more system by system and gave the status of each particular system. And so we had a meeting, I think, late in the spring with a few of you would kindly volunteer to help us out with like ideas on that. And then it took a while to actually kind of develop and figure out the data, because what we strive to do was to get both our engagement data as well as the financial data and pull those together. And it turned out there were technical issues around that we needed to overcome. Just matching up one system and one water system in one data category with the same water system, it wasn't always like a one-to-one, and it took a while for our technical staff to get in there and figure out some of those things, as well as technical assistance, which is in another database, and be able to pull all those together into one cohesive tool. So yeah, the next slide. And do you want to go over the questions? So I think these were the things that we were just wanted to ask all of you in this group once you see the tool. You know, what ways can you use it? What are you looking for? Are there things that we can improve? And this is definitely what you'll see is the first iteration of the tool. So there's definitely things that we know we'd like to put in there in the future as we can continue to develop it, but also definitely want to hear what are the most useful aspects, what are other things that this group and also, you know, the people who would go in and actually use this tool, what would be the most useful. So this is just, again, just summarizing what I had already said. There's a screenshot there of the tool. You can go in and look up any failing water system, and it'll spill out all of this data on it. And then right now, because of the way our different data systems work, we have to do basically a manual update for it. It doesn't just automatically pull the data in. But that's part of what we're working on. And actually part of what this project helped us with was like, how do we actually get the data to communicate properly? And so we'll be updating it on a quarterly basis, but it's just a manual update that we have to do that to pull it all in. But that's how often it'll be updated. Are we able to go into the tool? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
If not, that's okay. I can try to explain just from the screenshot.
I don't know. I'll have Rachel check in about that. But in the meantime, as Rachel's checking in, if we can do a screen share of the tool, I want to direct you all while Rachel is asking Caroline if you could do a screen share of the tool right now. I'm going to direct you all to your PowerPoint, and in the handout you do have it. It's really tiny though. But we have the link.
Yeah.
On the page where you're able to, where you're able to find it. I'd also be curious about your feedback around mobile access. So if you have an opportunity to look this up on your phone, and if you have any feedback, this is our first iteration. So maybe Andrew, if you could walk us through the different categories.
And I'll just kind of point up here, but so what we have, so for any, there's actually, if you go on the web, there's a place where you can go and you can put in the name of any, or you can scroll down through all of them and find anyone that you're looking for. Once you do that, this is what comes up. So this is an example for Keeler. It's just some basic, up at the top here, basic information about the system, the type of system, who it's regulated by, how many population, number of connections, the type of ownership, surface area, the DAC status, median household income, and then also the CalEnviro screening score. So just basic sort of information about the system and the number of people and things like that. Then, the next section is about our engagement efforts with the system. So there's just a brief summary, a couple sentences of what the engagement efforts are. So the system has exceedance of the arsenic MCL. Provost and Pritchard is an administrator for this system, and the TA provider is helping with the long-term solution. And then the next piece actually gives what it's failing for, and then whether it's sort of on track or not on track in terms of our assessment of its progress. And then here they're consolidating. It talks about where we are with the consolidation, and who they'll be consolidating with. If they have an administrator, there's this section here on the administrator, and I'm seeing here that so this is an example of things we need to work on, right? It says here Provost and Pritchard has been assigned, and down here in the administrator section, it still says TBD. So there's some issues there that we're still working through. That's all the engagement work. The next section is about the financial assistance that we're providing. And so this talks about the first one is just the different funded projects, the different types of projects, whether they're interim, whether they're long-term, administrator, and then it gives the project amount. The next is the technical assistance. And again, this is pulled from a separate database, but it talks about the category, who's providing the technical assistance, when it started, and then I'm not sure, there were some issues with pulling in the amounts of the actual funding, and I think that's still being worked on. So that's another, I think, improvement that we're working on, is just being able to separate out how that goes from each TA provider to each particular project, and just being able to put that up here. And then the last category is any internal supply funding that they have. So again, and then all of this will change depending on the system and what assistance they're receiving, and that at least kind of gives you an idea, and definitely encourage everybody to go in and go to the link and just kind of play around with it. Try to break it, right? Try to see what works, see what doesn't work, and then let us know. And then let us know like what improvements we can make, because there are definitely a lot of different things we can do with this tool. And I mean, one of the basic questions that I have, going back to that first slide there, was just like, is this what folks are looking for? Are we on the right track? Like, just basically, are we kind of hitting the mark of what we had talked about in the spring?
Thank you, Andrew. I see Kristen with a hand up, and Eva next. So a reminder, if you do have a question, comment, reaction, please flip your name vertically, and please speak loudly so that we can all try to hear each other. And then the general discussion question is this the right information that would be helpful? What information would be helpful, and in what format? Kristen?
Great. Thank you. A couple of comments, and I'll try to be quick. I think this is great. This seems really, really useful, both for myself, rather than having to bug a TA provider. I can go get the information myself. That is great. And when a resident calls me, I often get calls from residents who then I can look up information about their system and provide some transparency. I think it's awesome. I'm really excited about it. I played around with it a lot last night. Couple of comments. I think if we could add the year to executed agreements, I think that would be really helpful. A well project that was executed in 2015 is really different than one executed in 2023, and just having that information would be really useful. The engagement assessment box, I would urge you to consider if this is the type of information that should be public. Some of them say like needs work, and I just wonder about what the impression that gives someone's. It comes off a little judgmental to me. And I just don't know what the use of someone outside of the board having that information is. My big one is that a lot of these systems I came up with said administrator in planning. And these are systems I'm almost positive have not been notified about the potential of an administrator. And I think that has a huge potential to undermine relationships. If a board member went to this and saw that they're maybe being targeted for administrator, but the board has not come to them about that yet, that seems like a really big problem. So the administrator, I think, really needs to be aligned with the process that you have formalized and shouldn't show up there until the board has been formally noticed about that. And then just a plea for a future meeting, the number that said administrator and planning to me was a little alarming, and I would love to have a conversation with this board about how the administrator process is moving forward, what types of systems are being targeted, how that compares to TA. I think this body would have a lot of good conversation on that topic, and I think first meeting or second meeting in the new year, if we could talk about the administrators in terms of like all these administrator and planning processes, that would be great.
Can I just on that last one, I mean, I think one of the things that we're running up against with the administrator program is that it's costing a lot of money, frankly, for the administrators. And so we're trying to be, judicious about where we use them. And I think one good thing to maybe talk about with this group in the future is like where it's the most appropriate to use an administrator versus like other tools that we may have.
Yeah, I think it'd just be a good conversation for us to have.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Okay, so I also went in last night and like put in a few of our systems that we work with. And it seems like really, really great information that's available. I think I just have a couple of things, possibly an estimated end date. I mean, ours, change here or there, but maybe instead of, I don't know, engagement assessment, maybe estimated date when they might be back in compliance. Some kind of timeline or progress tracker, like, we can put they're in construction, but that has a lot of milestones to it. So maybe if they're in construction, we break it down. Where are they in construction? Are they finalizing design? Are they already out to bid? Are they just waiting on the, final budget approval? That might be helpful for people to know, are we going to see work starting soon or not? And those all change with all the different projects. Under the interim funding, I've noticed that, some of the ones that we have, and that's probably specific to our area, but they're not listed in there, like the emergency funding we've provided for smaller systems. I mean, it's not a huge amount, but it's still there. The bottled water, cold water in communities, all of those things are happening. Those ones weren't listed in some of the ones I looked up. I don't know if this one you guys can break down or not, but we have some communities where there's multiple TA providers, and they're all kind of clumped into one, and then there's one amount. And then it all just says maybe like the capacity development, I think was the category. And, it's not, I don't know, maybe for some of them, we all do capacity development, but there might be a couple where we're also doing planning in addition to capacity development. So just breaking that down a little bit further, and then maybe seeing how much money does go to capacity development versus planning and design. And that might be helpful to respond to some of the questions they had of, where does that TA money go? Yeah, I think those were the ones I identified, but it's really nice to see all that information in one. And on the phone, it does cut off, and you can't see like the last 2 or 3 boxes. There's no way to scroll. But I did look at that. Yeah,
It doesn't.
Try that.
Yeah,
it like
together.
pulls a couple more boxes in, but it doesn't. Yeah,
But it's
So-
nice it's on the phone.
but you can see it, and it does come up like good size. You just can't scroll. It just shows you what you can.
And I actually think that happens on the web version too, where you need to like stretch. So that's something we'll.
Yeah.
And I will say, a couple of those things that you mentioned were things that we were thinking about, like the estimated kind of end date compliance date. That's something that our engagement staff are working on for maybe, I don't know if it's all the failing systems, but a subset of the failing systems where hopefully by the end of the year that we'll have that, and then we can figure out a way to pull that in. And then the milestones is another one. We've talked about it. In fact, I think we even have talked about what categories from engagement and funding we would probably want to pull in. We just haven't been able to like technically do that yet. But I think that both of those things, again, would be really helpful. So yeah, thank
It
you.
provides a nice visual of, you know, even if you don't understand where the construction is, like you have an idea, maybe a little progress bar of how far they are.
Yeah. Great.
Awesome, thank you. Eric and then Sergio.
So one, just really wanted to say this is a great tool. I think we've been wanting to see a lot of this data more publicly available, both as a TA provider, but also someone who has or who has to like convey some of this information to communities. So I think for the public and just for folks who do this work, a really great tool. I had a question on the engagement assessment. Could you talk a little bit more about like what is that supposed to categorize?
Yeah, it's just, you know, so our staff, what we do is meet every quarter, engagement staff, with DFA staff, district staff, and we just go through and like, you know, where are these systems? Like, are they progressing like we thought they would? Are they not? Or do they, you know, and basically we've categorized, put it in 3 categories. Either they're on track, do they need some assistance to get on track, or they're just off track, right? And I can't remember the exact wording we use here, but that's essentially what it is. And so it's really just like where staff think they're at, like in terms of like, and again, this is where like having the milestones, right? Because then anybody could look and see, well, it's made it to this milestone or it hasn't, right? As opposed to just, do we think it's on track or not? But that's what it is.
Thank you for that. I would say something like that is like really useful because we often need to know like which one of the systems are not like, you know, helping move along the project.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a community member and you see that your water system is like, they're not helping move the project along, then you want to call your water system, talk to them. A couple other things that I had in terms of thoughts for this tool. In terms of the overview of the project, I think I was looking at some of the projects. I think maybe giving a little bit more context or just communicating these projects in a more public friendly way. I mean, I can read these, I understand what these are, but if it's just a community member, I think some of that might be challenging. Some more community accessibility, and then just visibility of this tool. I know you mentioned some of the like the phone accessibility, but I remember before I got this material packet, I stumbled across a tool and I was like, I haven't seen this before, but I almost missed it.
Yeah.
Because it was at the bottom of like a bunch of other menu tabs. So maybe giving it its own page, or just more front and center.
Yeah.
Really important. And I think that's it. But overall, I'm really excited to see what this tool can be used for.
Right. And I just was that an update. So it looks like by this late spring, we should get some of the milestones in there. So just Chad was just texted me that. So, and then I think, yeah, in terms of finding the tool, we just put it up. We got it done and put it up, and we should talk about finding a better place for it.
We're redoing the Safer website as a whole, and so we do want this to be like one of the first like steps, like first putting your community here and see what's happening. So I think we're redoing the Safer website to put more visibility on it too. So then can I just get clarification on your first comment about the engagement assessment? So were you saying that it is helpful, but we need to clarify what it means a little bit more? Can you explain that?
I guess the first question was just a clarifying question about like what the intent of the assessment was, but I would really want to see something like that.
Okay, keep it even though it's an internal check.
I think sometimes you have to make those tough assessments on who's helping move forward and who's being extra a challenge to move forward.
And I will say, for your comment on the sort of that summary and making it more, yeah, that's just pulled from what our staff write in the, in our clearinghouse database. And so we can talk to them about just as they update that, making it a little more plain language as opposed to like our technical summary of it. So you can do that, yeah.
Second.
Yes. So I'm picturing this tool with the realities that we have here in the community. So I see three elements here that we need to take in consideration while using this tool. Number one, communication. What is to communicate? So actually, through communication leads to the second one, which is transparency, because the community has been waiting for what's going to happen. When am I going to open my faucet and I finally have water that is drinkable? When is that going to happen? So, and then the third point is consistency. Why? Because we as a TA providers, we meet with the community and we provide reporting of where we are on consolidation projects and also interim solutions. So these two need to be consistent with the information we provided to the community and say, I'm gonna speak because I like to actually explain how we communicate with family in Spanish. I know somebody will say, mira hijo, ahí vino Pueblo Unido a decirnos de que ya estamos aquí al 90% de aprobar los planos de ingeniería. ¿Me puedes chequear ahí si es cierto que la herramienta dice eso? Déjeme ver, mamá. Sí, aquí dice, ¿cómo se llama? La Pierce. Y aquí dice que está 90%. Ah, pues sí es cierto, ¿verdad? Ahí sí está cierto. Ok. That's the cultural component that I'm talking about. That this tool. If we keep this tool in a very technical level, good luck. We're going to be only helping us ourselves, right? So again, we need to communicate whoever is actually maintaining that. This is what we are. Like we are communicating in this case with CBWD, we're communicating and coordinating the planning and design. Where is the CEQA status? Where is the engineering? So as soon as we got that consensus where we are, somehow we need to communicate whoever is actually putting that. So when we go to the community, we can say, this is what we are right now. And also, if you want to compare those to what the system says, it is there. So now, and this also it can be taken at two levels, because here, every single community has their own priorities. So these two need to be flexible enough to actually respond to every single community priorities and issues they have. In our case, when we started the program back in 2017, we realized by the time that we have a pipeline here, it's going to take a while. So what can we do in the meantime? Well, then we came out with you're going to hear me talk later today about the point of use and the point of entry as interim solutions. So these two as well need to actually show, illustrate, in our case, for example, that yes, consolidation is definitely the priority. But in the meantime, this community has already interim solutions in place. So again, saying with the lady, saying with the gentleman, mira hijo, es cierto que ya pusieron los sistemas de point of use aquí. Mira ahí en la website, and then the son will say, yeah, de acuerdo aquí, ya se pusieron los point of use. Vamos a ver ahí, si ahí está el point of use instalado, ¿cierto? Mira, ahí está. Good. It makes sense, So those are the kind of examples that I want to vividly explain to everyone that how this tool can be useful. Otherwise, we are going to be just talking to ourselves in a very high-tech level and we won't be able to convey to the community because this can be complex to the community. So it is generational. The son and the daughters of farm workers that we work maybe will be the one becoming extremely skillful because they are wired in that way. If I'm gonna go and talk to the people who have been working for the last 23 years, I'm not gonna overwhelm them. Let me show you, I got my laptop here, and let me show you how we are. So everything is transparent. Yo decía, no me esté enseñando eso porque realmente es too complicado para mí, it's too complex. So those are the kind of things that we need to have. The cultural component of implementing tools is critical, essential, paramount to achieve transparency and better communication. That's all that I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sergio. And I heard that, Andrew, that your team is working on the milestones. I think that it would be helpful based on Sergio's feedback to get feedback from all TA providers, not only for the cultural component, but so that one TA provider, the milestones that you identify are in alignment with other TA providers and the milestones they identify for that consistency too. So maybe that's a next step that the team can meet with the TA providers to talk through how do we want to communicate milestones. All right, Castle, and that's gonna be the last discussion item here. I also want to pause after Castle, if there's anybody who we haven't heard from yet who would like to add a comment or a question. Otherwise, we will end this discussion with Castle and move on to a quick break.
Yeah, I noticed that there's a long list of systems in the tool, and I think it's hard to, I think a lot of people don't know the name of their system. And so I don't know if this is tied to like a GIS map that someone can find their system by location through a map versus by name. I can tell you that I probably only know the name of 3-4 systems in this area. And we probably have over 100 of them. And so it's really hard to find your system unless you know the name. So tying it to a map, I think would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, we talked about that with our small group. And at that point, there was, I think the feedback we got was to not have a map because it took up too much space. And, and so, but we could maybe try to figure out, we could do a map. Like that's actually what the tool that we're using for this.
Could you look at a different page where you could
Potentially,
to find the name of your system?
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea, something like that. So yeah, we could definitely think about that. So yeah, it's a good point. Like, it's like some technical name.
Sometimes the names are like the name of the person or it's strange.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Castle. Final reflections, comments, reactions. Jennifer.
I just would like to second what Sergio said about adding another level of detail to this for the community, because Keeler it's interesting that you chose Keeler for this, because there are actually 3 TA providers on it, and one of them isn't even on here, which is RCAC. So RCAC is a sub to Provost and Pritchard, and twice a month we go out to Keeler to distribute that bottled water. So it'd be great for the community to have a contact for that water distribution and to know when it is and where it is. So thanks for bringing that up, Sergio.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you everyone for your feedback. Andrew, anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, just that we'll definitely take all this feedback, go back, kind of see what we can do with kind of what we have. Like I said, we're definitely in the process of working on the milestone part of that this is something we can keep bringing back to the group with as we change and improve it, and just get feedback on it. But I really appreciate it. Very helpful.
And then as we wrap up this section, I just want to say thank you to the advisory group to making this recommendation for us earlier this year. And I also want to give a special shout out to a core group of advisory group members, including Tanya, Rami, Sarah, and Michael Prado Sr., who helped inform the development of this tool. So thank you for taking the time to meet with us in between advisory group meetings for that too. All right. Well, with that, we're gonna be taking a quick 5-minute break-ish. So if we wanna come back at 10 a.m., then we're gonna start our next discussion on the needs assessment. That we are around the corner.
Yeah, very different. Pacific, yeah. These actually said losses here.
Some of your staff.
Next part of our agenda here. Andrew from the Division of Drinking Water is gonna be walking us through proposed updates for next year's drinking water needs assessment. So similarly, Andrew's gonna give a brief presentation, and then we're gonna have a group discussion here in the same room. Andrew?
Yep, so thank you. Again, just want to give a brief update on some of the changes that we're proposing for the upcoming needs assessment. And it's not in the presentation, so I just want to start off by letting everybody know there are actually going to be 2 workshops next week. One on the 12th, which is going to go over the last part of the proposed changes to the cost model, including the preliminary results of like what the model costs look like. And then on the next day, on the 13th, we're gonna go over the proposed changes to our failing criteria and a little more of a summary around the rest of the cost model. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that because it's not in the slides. Okay, next slide, please. So here are the questions we were hoping to get some feedback on. One of the things that we can do is we can kind of break down these results in various ways, right? We have a lot of data, and we're interested in some of the best ways that we can do that. How we can present the data in a way that's useful. And then what would be most helpful in terms of how the fund expenditure plan uses this data. So what we do with that, and then sort of ideas for future enhancements beyond. Again, the fund expenditure plan is kind of the driver for the needs assessment. The needs assessment results then get used by Joe and his team in developing the fund expenditure plan. Just a reminder of the components of the needs assessment. So we have a list of failing water systems, and we develop criteria around that. I'll talk a little bit about those today. We have a risk assessment, which looks at different risk factors for water systems, and then a determination of who's at risk or not at risk. That's the category that actually that isn't changing this year. We're keeping those the same for this year. There's the cost assessment. That's the big change for this year, which I'll talk about, and the affordability assessment, which is what we worked on last year. So we're not going to do a further update for the next one for that, but we just did that recently. Next slide. This is just you can go back and you can look at where the needs assessment reports are and get more information on that. And then this again is just showing sort of how the needs assessment is used. We develop the assessment, we bring our proposals to this group, and then it goes into the fund expenditure plan, and then it's just part of our whole process to get into clean water for our communities. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to cover, as I mentioned, is just changes to our failing criteria. Yeah, so as I mentioned, the failing list, we have criteria that we develop that look at everything from MCL violations to the missed monitoring reports, those sorts of things. And we're proposing to take out a couple of the existing criteria and then add in several criteria. So again, the driving factor here is to figure out which systems are consistently out of control. So that's sort of our mandate from the safer program. I think this sort of says the same thing. Again, I think the 386 failing water systems, that changes literally sort of day to day, but it's right around between 380 and 390 right now. Again, you can go and look at our tools. This is the other tool that we had mentioned previously, where you can go and have a look at the failing water systems and actually go and explore why the systems are at risk on that. Okay, so these are the proposed changes, and so it shows what we've been doing throughout the program. So actually the bottom two rows are what we kind of talk about here. The first is the monitoring and reporting violations. We're changing and expanding that slightly just to, it's more technical changes to conform to like how we technically enter and use the data. That's only actually gonna, it looks like, add one system and subtract one system. So it actually doesn't make a big difference in terms of who's on the list. The bottom row there is really the main thing, which is we're looking at water capacity, water supply issues, and systems that have violations related to their water supply, having to do things like clogged water, for example, is one of them. And so we're going to be adding, I think it's four violation types related to the water supply and the capacity of the system. And I should say, because I guess I thought there was one more, but for that bottom row, it adds, I think, 18 systems to our list if we do that as proposed. And so that's again one of the things that'll be talked about at the workshop. So if folks want to get into a lot of the details on that, that's what we'll be talking about next week. So as I mentioned, the main thing that staff have been working on over the past 2 years really is having a bunch of workshops and input from everyone on changes to the cost assessment. So the cost assessment was done originally as part of the original needs assessment, which came out in 2021. And at the time when that cost assessment was begun, it was actually begun under a contract before the SAFER program existed. And so there's some things that have changed since that was done. And so we tried to update it both with new data about what things cost, but also align it better with our current program. We can keep going. All right, so this is again part of the direction for anticipating funding needs that was in SB 200. And just to reiterate, so the results of the cost assessment are to help prioritize funding, right? So we know what different components and things cost, so that funding can be prioritized based on those costs. But it's not intended to look system by system at, at what things cost. It's meant to look just a model of what we think things would cost overall based on system sizes and solutions, as opposed to specifically what works in any particular circumstance. Okay, so this is just, you can click through. Thank you. This is actually just summarizing what we did in 2021. I don't want to really spend a lot of time on it, but maybe if we go to the next slide, which shows what we changed. So in this model, the first thing we're looking at is physical consolidation viable? So the prior model actually didn't do that. It just started out with costs, and it ended up overestimating some types of costs, like for point of use, point of entry type of solutions, and underestimating consolidation type of solutions. And so we know in terms of our direction from the program, both from the statute, from our board's direction, that physical consolidation is the thing that we are prioritizing. So now the cost model is doing that in line with what the program does. And then if physical consolidation is not viable, then it moves on to looking at decentralized. It looks at centralized treatment without consolidation. So we have many systems, almost 50% that are maybe too far away from another system to, or geographically you can't, run a pipe easily to do that. That physical consolidation wouldn't work. So the next step is, if that's the case, what would centralized treatment cost? And then if that's not going to work, then we move on to decentralized treatment, point of use, point of entry. And that's kind of how the model progresses in terms of how it chooses which costs to assign. Again, we've had 3 workshops so far, beginning in July. The first one was just looking at focusing on the physical consolidation and the costs associated with that. There's a lot of details. There's the presentation. You can go back and look at the recording of that webinar. And the second workshop looked at the treatment, the options, outside consolidation for doing treatment, what those costs should be, and the details behind that. And the third workshop kind of looked at a variety of things, other types of infrastructure needs like distribution system, replacement, things like that, administrative costs and needs, and interim solutions and how much those would cost. And then there are a couple of things actually that didn't make it on the slides that I do want to just talk about. So the first is, so we're going to come out with the updated costs next week, and just saw those a day or two ago. But essentially, just to give folks a preview, it looks like the costs will about double from the original model in 2021. So the original model is close to $5 billion, and this one it's going to be a little over $10 billion. Some of that is driven just by things are costing more. There's supply chain issues that have continued and things like that that are making just physical projects cost more. But one of the big drivers is actually, and it's something that this group has talked about, is domestic well solutions, because we're not looking just at the water systems, but we're also looking at the domestic wells. And the costs for those domestic well solutions have gone up, mostly because of the way we're modeling them is different. But that's actually about half of the increase in the overall program costs that you'll see is due to costs associated with domestic well solutions. So and the other thing I should mention is that going back to the first point is the capital costs themselves for the water systems are approximately doubling. So I just wanted to, again, we didn't have time to get that slide in, but I wanted to make sure everybody's aware a lot of these details will be discussed next week in those results, but just so kind of people can have it in their mind with like where it looks like it's going. Okay, and with that, happy to answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. And one more time, reminder, please flip your names vertical to add yourself to the queue. And another reminder to try to project and speak loudly. So like Andrew mentioned, there's been a couple changes or proposed changes for 2024. Right now, the division is in the process of collecting feedback on those proposed changes. So on one, the expansion of the failing list criteria. So how does source capacity affect whether a water system is characterized as failing, which would add more water systems to that list. And then the second thing they've done is they've changed the cost assessment to also look at different types of solutions and potential costs for them. So any questions, comments, or reactions on Andrew's overview? Rob?
One of the questions I had was, what is the precursor for failing system? Is there a place that we can go to and look and say, under this category, these are what causes that particular system to fail, whether it's contamination or whether it's slow water usage or availability for water? How do we go about and find out what is the actual cause of the failure of that system?
Yeah, so well, I think one is the tool we just talked about has that. But
the question about that tool as we talked earlier is really hard to see.
Yeah.
Exactly what categories were available. That was the question there.
I think the other is the existing tool with the map and which, and there's the link in one of these slides to that. You can actually go in and look at any failing system. You can pull it up on the map, or you can enter the name, and it will tell you the details of why they're failing. I can say, I think it's about 90% of the failing systems are because of MCL violations, and then the other is spread between the other categories of monitoring and reporting violations, and a couple other treatment type, violations. And then, like I said, this new, the new category will have about 8 payment systems. So for it, 390, we'll be adding approximately 18 systems if we go forward with this proposal. Okay.
Does that help answer your question, Ron?
The other question was that, it seems like there's a lot of the monitoring that's monitored by the individual who reports to the state. So the system can fail just because it hasn't been reported properly.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a complicated criteria, but they have to miss a certain number of reports. I think it's 3 reports in 3 years with an active enforcement action on at least one of those reports. But it's more than just one missed report.
So it could be an admin fail rather than a physical fail.
It could.
Okay, so that's what I was looking at. Does it stipulate the difference between an admin fail and a physical fail?
Yes, it should. It should be. It should be able to do that. And so right now we have our what's called our clip system, where the sample data goes to the laboratory and the laboratory directly reports it. Right. And so it would likely be a failure to get it to the laboratory, or to not take the sample properly, or those sorts of things. Like once the sample is taken and it goes to the lab, it's essentially done. That would be.
So the reason I bring that up is because in Shasta County / Tehama County in far northern California, we had a contractor who was supposed to go out and do 16 different tests, and they failed to do the quarterly test, and therefore 16 different systems got hit.
Right.
But the company didn't get hit. Every single system got hit individually. So school systems, churches, nonprofits, individual corporations that had private wells, they all got hit on that. So one of my concerns was, as an individual as part of that list with our nonprofit, why did we as an organization take that hit when the corporation who failed to do the test properly didn't get hit? But we're the ones that had to pay the fine.
Yeah.
So that's my question, is why does the little guy pay the fine when the guy that's the contractor walks away and says, "Oh, we made a mistake, we'll get to you next time"?
Yeah. Well, briefly. I mean, unfortunately, that's sort of one of the downsides of our regulatory system, is we only have authority to regulate the water system, not the contractor. Now, there are some, there's operator certification, and there are things that go into that if they're not complying with, what they're supposed to do as an operator.
Well, and it's getting down into the weeds with the small users, but with the small users, we hire a contractor for due diligence.
Yep.
And then the contractor drops the ball, and yet we still get it. And everything else coming back that direction. So I just wanted to just find out. So you delegate that to the county, and then the county regulates that from the county level. But the county's the one that fined us for not having our tests in on time to get a contractor fail.
Yeah. So we have, I think it's 23 counties that do the direct regulation of systems smaller than 200 connections.
Right, Shasta County.
Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah. So that would come. We've delegated that authority to those particular counties. Yeah.
Okay.
Good question. And then do you have any recommendations on, I'm sure that is probably taking place in other places in the state. And so I'm wondering if you have any recommendations you can better address or bring visibility to that?
Well, when we did our TMF with Shasta County, my only suggestion would be that on their level, they communicate better to us as the end users, that we are still responsible if the contractor does not follow through. Because if I had realized that I was going to be ultimately responsible for my contractor failure, I would have been more steadfast as a project manager on my contractor. Because if I don't get it within my weekly review, it's through my emails, and I go, okay, you got to call and find out when are they going to do that test. And now I know that before I did not know that I needed to stay on top of my contractor, because you sign a contract, you figure it's going to be followed. And so the information up and down that chain would be nice to know, so that you can avoid getting that fine, that fee, and that red letter. Because I was really upset when I got it, because as far as I was concerned, my contractor is supposed to be on top of that. And then when I got the fine from the county, it's like, I'm not the one that dropped the ball. The contractor is. Why am I the one that's getting hit with the red letter? And so those were, as project managers, as we all know, they're all slam doing everything else along. This is one more task in the daily process of everything we're doing. And so when all of a sudden you get blindsided with that, especially as a small unit, it's just one more thing that's added to the list of things that should have been taken care of but didn't get to because we didn't know. And then the county says, well, it's not our fault you didn't know. So it's like, okay, so once again, I'll carry the shoulder of it, but somebody's got to help me along so I know what my responsibilities are as the end user, so that I can manage other people along the way. To make sure that, because like the school district didn't know, and the church didn't know, and then there was others, small businesses, they didn't know. All of a sudden, everybody on that guy's list, he just dropped the ball, and none of those were tested. So every single one of those got a red light, and we're all in the same boat. It's like, here we are. And the schools are all small schools, so some of them are private charters, so they don't have that extra money for those fines. And we're all trying to do the best we can to abide by the rules and regulations. And yet, here it goes up and down. So that's all.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up because it's not, I mean, I've definitely heard of that situation
We're
before.
very end user, but sometimes the end user picks up the whole bill.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and, not to interrupt, and it's just, it really is, there's enforcement discretion, obviously, sometimes, but, the challenge is we do have our funds. But I'll be exercising discretion on that with smaller systems, so. I think, more communication from us with the counties, more coordination, I think is a big part of how we do that amongst us, especially those that are running their own local privacy agreements.
Really helpful. Thank you for that, Ron. All right. Next up, I see Eva, then Sergio, and then Jennifer.
For the source capacity, so this is just the criteria for like failing systems, and they'll also evaluate like at-risk systems. So how far back are we looking? Because I know we've had a number of systems that had major outages, and we help them with emergency funds. They, put their pumps lower, things like that. But right now, because they have that help, they're not like considered at risk for failing. So how far back are we looking at?
Yeah, the failing is they'd have to have a current open enforcement action. As far as the at risk, I don't recall how getting the at risk related to water outages.
Yeah, because we're having a lot of like water levels dropping. Like one I'm thinking of is it dropped 100 feet in about 6 months almost, and if that happens again, and even what we did 2 years ago is not going to help them.
And I will say, we do have now, as of this year, water systems are reporting to us. They're a bunch of different things about their water supply because it came out of the drought issues that we were seeing. And so we're going to have, this will be the first year, so we'll have a year's worth of data. And so we'll be able to actually get more into that because we actually have a lot better data than we used to.
And then the other two more questions, but the next question I have on the cost assessment model, you went from physical consolidation to centralized treatment. Is that just to identify maybe the costliest option or like a new source doesn't cost as much, or did you not evaluate new sources?
New sources are in there.
Okay.
And so yes, I don't recall exactly where it is in the order, but yes, that's
doesn't always jump to centralized.
Yeah, correct.
Especially for the small communities where it's very expensive to maintain. And then the last question going on the updated costs that you said are about double from 2021. Is that going to impact like grant funding limits for the SRF program in the future? Right now we've got a certain amount and we're kind of hitting really close to that amount in a lot of our projects. So will we see like an increase kind of based on these numbers, or will this support and potential increase?
Well, I'll maybe kick it over to Joe in a second, but I think, you know, one of the things that we did in the first needs assessment was actually do a gap analysis, and I think we're intending to do that this time, which will show, you know, sort of the current or the projected available funding versus like what the need is, right? And I mean, there's definitely going to be a large gap there. I don't know, Joe, if you wanted to.
Yeah, sure. And for clarification, when you all are doing the modeling, you're not necessarily doing a deep dive where you would know whether an alternative source is viable.
Right.
I mean, we know that when we actually do the project planning,
Correct.
drill test wells, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, the reality has long been that we do not have enough state and federal funding to meet to fully finance the needs in small disadvantaged communities for failing systems, let alone, you know, Atlas systems, et cetera. So I think what it will come down to with the board is deciding how to prioritize further, you know, the limited funding we have. So, you know, we went through a period of a few years where we got a lot of state funding, but we're going to get a lot more federal funding than we have gotten. And we actually didn't anticipate those huge increases in costs either. So we are hopeful, and you know, the board adjusted its policies to allow for more 100% grants than we had before. So you all may, those of you who have been in TA for a while may recall that, you know, just 6-7 years ago, we didn't do a lot of 100% grant financing, and a lot of it was, you know, say 75%, depending on, you know, is it a severely disadvantaged community or disadvantaged community. So the board may well go back to some of those policy choices, you know, either limiting the number of communities that we're able to help through prioritization, but going 100% grant, or doing something like 75% grant. But I do think we're going to have to more than likely significantly limit the types of projects that we fund with 100% grant. You know, we're already focusing primarily on consolidations and those projects for failing systems. So depending on where things go, we may have to further restrict those projects that receive grant funding. Because like what Andrew was saying in terms of the modeling is what we're seeing in reality, right? So his team looks at the information that, you know, we all are gathering, where we, you know, we get those engineers' estimates, and even if, you know, you go to bid a year or a year and a half later, all of a sudden, you know, costs are 50% higher. So I don't think it's because we have bad engineers. I think it's because the reality is that there's just huge cost inflation that's going on now. And that's even outside of like the bipartisan infrastructure law has these Build America, Buy America provisions. Those aren't even in play for these projects that we're talking about. Yeah, we're seeing pretty big cost increases.
Does that help answer your question, Eva?
Thank you.
All right, next up, I think I saw Sergio Eric.
Yes, so I am so thrilled I get to see this process. Because, quite frankly, here in the Coachella Valley, when we started to work with the Polanco communities, back in, well, I have been there since 2011. So I want to just to share with all of you that the first pilot program for point of use was in 2012. And we tested on Polanco Park, and that was the part that definitely transformed the way how we find alternative solutions. 2012. So that park still is in the path of consolidation. So it is important to evaluate using this tool, this model, how we actually provide solutions to different rural communities. We went through this process already, and I'm so happy to see that because Back in 2016, when we actually get the contracts to do TA, we already knew that it will take at least a decade to actually see a pipeline on the ground. So we are assisting around 41 Polanco parks that are classified as non-transient community water systems. So we have installed all point of views, and we are now initiating the process of the new generation of point of entry. Later, you'll see the model. For the systems that are not going to be in path of consolidation. So that process is definitely perfectly designed for that. That's for me one of the best engineering decision-making, how we actually provide support to the community. But also because this process can actually adapt to the big reality that we don't know what's going to happen with financial resources from here to 5, 10, 15 years. So we can dream about consolidating a lot of people, right? But that's not the reality. So we need to be prepared from the engineering, from the financial, from the strategic kind of mindset perspective to be able to offer any kind of solution that would be sustainable and for the long haul for the community. It's very important to do that. But also, Andrew bring another big question. One thing is the water, and we know we deal with the water. We have the system already in place, working fine. But then you have the issues of the actual water distribution system. So think about these 41 Polanco parks. They all have their own well system. It's very simplified. It's not complex. So they tell us all the time, we have a leak, this tank, the pressure tank is not working. The well is creating sand and all that kind of stuff. So we have created a system to go and respond to those. So I'm super, super incredibly happy that we have an augmentation to the existing funding that we have with for the interim solutions to actually assist now mobile home park to the same way we have a schedule of maintenance for point of use and replacement. Now we're going to start on scheduling to monitor how this well system are operating to make sure that we always ahead of the game and preventing from failing. So that's critical as well. So we need to understand that. But the other thing is important for me to emphasize is this. We all need to actually, through the system, this TA and the SAFER program, to help nonprofit to build capacity to go and respond to the community. If we expect some other people that are not local, they don't know the culture, that they don't have relationship with the community, it's going to be quite difficult to be able to actually assist those families. So first is the trusted relationship that you need to establish. Then comes the technical. So we need to make sure that these resources also provide the capacity to nonprofits to take it to the next level, to have a technical expertise to provide that assistance to make sure that these families are definitely well served. Which brings me the next question. Do we really need to think about this intersupply as the label of the program? Because in my opinion, ya pasaron 10 años. There was more than 10 years already elapsed. And those systems are coming here to stay. So do we need to consider to maybe changing the labeling of that and probably call that, to say over there, decentralized treatment? Because those are, in many cases, are going to be permanent. That's the reality. And we need to actually come to terms with that. So yeah, this is our inter-solution, AB 434, that we actually work with Assemblymember Garcia to make the point of use and point of entry a permanent solution because it was going to sunset back in 2013. So we went ahead and say, no, we need this to be permanent. Otherwise, these communities are going to be in trouble. So now it's a permanent solution. It is adopted by the State Water Board. However, it said, until water consolidation is feasible. Well, feasibility also means that we have financial resources, right? So in my opinion, this is a permanent solution when no other solution is going to be. So we need to have this to our disposal, most importantly to the community disposal. So once again, having an ongoing O&M as a permanent source of funding for this kind of system is paramount. It's essential. We cannot say, well, hopefully they will consolidate. We have an incredible array of realities here that are not going to be conducive to actually find this consolidation as an alternative. So I wanted just to make sure that everyone understands what we are facing and the response that we have made to these communities and how everything has evolved and improve the work. So we need to have different tools to address those concerns.
Can I just add just sort of one thing? I think from the funding perspective, I think that's very correct. From the regulatory perspective, you know, we can't say that point of use and point of entry is a long-term solution unless every single household has it. That's just a restriction of our regulations, right? And so they would still be considered a failing system from our regulatory perspective. But I very much understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Thank you both. So I want us to be cognizant of time. We do have to start wrapping up this item. So we're gonna go Jennifer, Eric, and then I want to check in with Castulo if you do want to speak on this. Otherwise,
comment.
okay, so we'll go with Jennifer.
So, Andrew, I noted that 50% of the increase on the cost assessment was attributed to domestic well solutions. And I just wonder if you could expand on what those solutions are and how communities can go about getting that funding, because, you know, when you're talking about a community water system, the system is the applicant, right? Now we're talking about domestic wells, and the residents need to, you know, maybe go to a TA provider and then they're the recipient. Well, we have, Rob noted Shasta County, we've got neighborhoods, not just one or two domestic well owners, but full on neighborhoods of people that have no water. So how is DDW prioritizing their needs, and how do we get assistance to dozens, maybe 100 domestic wells that have zero water right now?
So I think, you know, as far as the cost model goes, right, is one thing. I think there's a couple of different things here, but as far as the cost model goes, I'll just tell you what we did to estimate the cost. We went to, you know, we have an existing tool, an existing list of high risk domestic wells for water shortage and water supplies. We took that list. We tried to look at which ones could potentially consolidate if they were within or close to, you know, an existing water system, and which ones would need a new one, essentially. And then there's also interim supplies, and then that drove the cost, right? And so again, you can go to the workshop and get into like the nitty gritty of the details of that, but that's essentially what we did for the costs, and that's why the costs are so high. There's well over 100,000 domestic wells that we know of that have issues that need to be addressed, or at least are high risk according to our analysis. As far as like our engagement process and what you're talking about, you know, I think we're still coming to grips with that, quite honestly, like how we really deal with domestic wells in a, I don't know, more systematic way than we have been. And I think the first thing that we'd like to do is actually start off with looking at domestic wells that are within the boundaries of an existing system, right? That's probably the easiest, and then kind of move out from there. But it's not an easy solution or a cheap solution or a quick solution. You know.
Yeah, I realize that the domestic wells that are maybe easier to connect to a system are low hanging fruit, but there are so many communities where consolidation or connecting to a system is infeasible. Right. And I just wonder, is the state working with the counties to map those neighborhoods that have zero water?
And that's something,
We have, the state kind of run by the Department of Water Resources has what's called the DRIP Collaborative, which is looking at drought response and drought preparedness. And that's one of the things that group is talking about is domestic wells specifically, and people who don't have water or at risk of not having water, and how we come up with a state strategy for that. So actually that group has been working on that.
If you have anything more, I just wanted to add, I really appreciate the discussion here. You know, domestic wells, dry domestic wells particularly are, I know, you know, when SAFER was being negotiated and discussed, it was really about small failing systems and the focus on small failing systems. And we knew that we had a domestic well issue as well with this, you know, second turn of the drought, if you will, within as many, you know, this decade. That has become, and you saw here in our funding, how much more is going, how much we're having to reserve for dry wells, because we are a last resort. This program is backfilling the resources at the county level that really aren't there to respond to dry wells. And the state said, no, we are going to be that backstop. But what it's created is this growing obligation we really have, all collectively certainly, but on the state level right now, putting pressure on SAFER to say, what do you do about the domestic well issue? And so to Andrew's point, there is drip out there in discussion. But also, and this has been discussion at the state board, is we have the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And these issues of groundwater management, drought impacts in communities are all intertwined there within as well. And so as we, you know, in many of the same communities, and we're the 6 basins for the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act are many of the basins that have been found inadequate and are before the state board are many of those basins that we're all working in right here. So the overlap and interconnectivity of this program to drought response, to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, to how we sustain our communities through these challenges, and the big question, who's going to pay for it? Where do the resources come to address this? They're live. They're very live in here. And so just appreciate the discussion. I just wanted to add a little more.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. I think this is a perfect topic. I think like what you're hearing is for the last 4 years of the SAFER program, we've really been focused on where can we do physical consolidations as quickly as possible. And I think what we're noticing now is, okay, now we're transitioning about those partner systems like Sergio mentioned. And so I think that's a perfect discussion for us to talk about in next year's advisory group meeting scheduled as well. So thank you. We're gonna go Eric Castelo, then we're gonna wrap up the discussion and transition.
Yeah, well, thanks for the presentation. And I'm going to share some thoughts, but I also did want to answer some of the prompt questions here. So one of the questions was, how do we want the cost assessment to be broken down? And I think some of them that are really see is the county, cost by county, by legislative districts would also be helpful. Because you see the need for a lot of funding, and hopefully legislators will see that funding and see how much their communities need support. And then on contaminant, I think is also something that we really want to see, really because I think it ties into some of the domestic well impacts. I know you in the cost assessment, it analyzes the cost impacts for all wells across the state for different contaminants. But the reality is that in California, a lot of the domestic wells are impacted by are contaminated because of industry and because of over extraction and contamination that gets into our drinking water. And so I know here as a safe advisory group, we don't have like a direction to provide feedback on the implementation of water quality programs or the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. But I think it really impacts the funding decisions that we make, and it alters, you know, how much money we have available to direct towards the hard consolidation projects, and we really need to see. And so looking at those by contaminant is important. So I would really like to see that. Hopefully we could, I think ideally we want to see like, this is how many nitrate impacts and how many folks should be responsible for that. And then a couple other points that I had here was around the, let's see, helpful for the supervisor. I'll switch over to, in terms of data collection. So one of the things that we saw in the fund expenditure is the water sampling program. I think that will be something that will be really important moving into 2025, so we can continue to get more data around domestic wells, but also around, you know, small water systems that have been, you know, the local privacy agency or the counties who are regulating and are not getting a lot of data from those systems around what's in the water, and they're not testing frequently. So I think getting more data on that is going to be really important moving forward. And let me see. I think that's it.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right,
Yeah, I just wanted to get clarification on what drives step one. I think I recall that it was maybe determined by a distance to existing infrastructure. I don't know if that was, is that the only thing that drives step one? And is it a mile or 5 miles? And because now you're adding more systems, and there's a increase in construction costs, is there like a benefit to revising that distance? That's something that you thought about?
Yeah, the distance was revised from the prior model. I don't remember offhand exactly what we revised it to. So
Is that the only factor? Is that
that's the main factor. Yeah.
all right, we've got to wrap up, so I encourage you all, if you have any more questions for Andrew, please catch him throughout the day. Now we're gonna be wrapping up the needs assessment. We're moving on to an update. Safer program updates. We're not gonna talk about safer program updates in detail, but they are located in your packet on page 7. The safer program updates that are included include the changes that were made to this year's fund expenditure plan. So we talked about the fund expenditure plan at the last advisory group meeting. The board has since adopted it for the next year. You heard from the kind of the proposed changes, but if you want more details, it's included in those program updates. The program updates also include a tentative safer timeline with a couple of events, including the ones that Andrew mentioned taking place next week for the safer needs assessment. So if you're interested in going more detail into the technical components of next year's needs assessment, please check out next week's workshop. And then in terms of the advisory group dates for next year, we're currently finalizing them. You all gave us really great feedback around topics for next year. So in the next couple of months, we'll try to send out proposed dates so that you all can better plan your schedule accordingly for next year. Before we move on to public comment, I just want to pause and see if there's any comments about the program updates. Oh, and the program updates also include updates about legislative changes related to water as well. Okay. If you're reading through them today, you can find any one of us and we can have a more one-on-one discussion about any of those updates. But for now, I want to transition to give an opportunity for public comments. So there's a lot of folks here in person that we want to check in and to see. The purpose of this public comment section is for members of the public who are not invited members to share any comments about the agenda items that we talked about today. So that would be the 2023 accomplishments, the project tool, the project status tool that we talked about, and the proposed 2024 needs assessment updates. So those are the 3 topics that we're soliciting public comment on. We're going to begin here with folks in the room, and then I'm going to check in with Rachel to see if there's any people online who are interested in coming on virtually. So for folks here in the room, if you'd like to comment, feel free to just raise your hand and I'll try to, we'll go one, chronological. And we do ask that you please limit your public comments to 3 minutes, just because we do have a bus tour to get to. All right. So with that, we're going to start with folks on the room. If anyone has a public comment, feel free to raise their hand.
Great.
John Harrison, Community Water Center. Just wanted to build on some of the previous comments on the safer tracking tool, which I'm really excited about. I think one thing right now, it looks like the tool basically focuses on failing public water systems. And I wondering if there's a way to bring in the domestic well areas we've talked about, at least areas where projects are ongoing. So for instance, we're working on a community water centers and projects where we have, exactly like, I think Jeff was talking about a cluster, like 100 households or 50 households that are big domestic wells, and it can somehow be incorporated basically into that tracking tool. And then I also really liked Costello's comment about the mapping, because one thing we found, I think even in areas like where we overlap geographically with self-help, where we're working on a long-term consolidation project for domestic wells, and they're working on interim solutions, and sometimes it's not really obvious that we're working in the same area without having a map like that. So if there was a way to kind of have a map that showed the boundaries of these projects too, so that each of us could go to our service area and see how our work overlaps with others, I think that would be really valuable.
Great. Thank you.
All right, while you all are thinking whether or not to raise your hand, I want to check in with Rachel to see if there's any
Nothing online right now.
Well, for those of you in the room, I also encourage you all to continue asking and sharing your feedback throughout today. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the public comment portion, and we're going to transition to talk about this afternoon's tour. So in your packet, you should have a handout that has information about the celebration and the tour taking place this afternoon. So here's what to expect in the next couple of minutes. So in the next couple of minutes, we're going to wrap up the first portion of our Safer Advisory Group meeting. We will end the webcast, and then we will transition outside to a bus. We're all going to get on the bus. We're going to bring your handout and anything else, any of your personal belongings. We're going to take those on the bus with us. And our first stop is going to be Westside Elementary School. At Westside Elementary School, we will have a brief program to celebrate over 100 consolidations completed since the initiation of the SAFER program. You will get to hear from a number of different speakers, and you will also get to hear from students who have prepared a really great surprise for you all. After the Westside Elementary School visit, we're going to drive to Thermal Mutual, where we will hear from Costello about the importance of the consolidation project. We will not stop at the consolidation site, but we will learn about it as we drive around it. So we're going to stay on the bus and learn about the project in English and Spanish from Costello. From the Thermal Mutual consolidation, we're going to then move to the next stop, which is the San Jose Community Center, where we will hop off the bus and we will do a walking tour of the community who is currently using point of use and point of entry filtration systems. So we'll learn about that project, and then we'll end our tour at the San Jose Community Center to celebrate the community-led leadership that drove a lot of the projects here in the Coachella Valley. After the celebration in the San Jose Community Center, we're gonna all hop on the bus one more time, and then we will drive back at 3:30 back to the Coachella Valley Water District offices, where we can all pick up our cars and head back to our hotels or to the airport. If for some reason you need to head out to the airport before this, please reach out to Rachel, and we can connect you with a ride back to the airport or back to the Water District offices. If you are not joining us on the tour and you're heading out right now, I want to ask that you please take the evaluation that's in your folder and please complete it. If you are staying with us for the tour, we're going to complete the evaluations on the bus when we're driving back from the community center. The last logistic is that when you walked in, you should have received a liability form for the bus. So if you haven't signed it and submitted it to Marina, please do so before you get on the bus. And then Any questions on the tour or what to expect?
We're not going on the bus right now.
We're not going on the bus right now. Yes, we're gonna pause.
So don't go to the bus right now. I don't think because unless you're gonna leave, you could take what's in front of you that, there's some things here, the hat and the water bottle. But so for those that are coming back, you can leave it here and just get it when we're all done. And that's all I wanted to say. Oh, one more thing. We do on the way from west side to the San Jose Community Center, we will be passing by mutual that consolidation, but we're also going to be passing by Valley View on the way. So we'll do that also.
Awesome. Thank you for that addition, Councilwoman. All right, well, with that, we're gonna formally wrap our webcast of the Safer Advisory Group meeting. The next portion of the meeting, the tour and the celebration, that's not going to be webcast. So for those of you that are watching us online, thank you for joining us. And with that, we're gonna go ahead and end our webcast and we're gonna transition to our